All right. This should get us on the right track, I think, for the rest of the day. I had to say that, Matt. Welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you, Mark.
Um, I think that people are going to be actually quite interested in the uniqueness of what you do from all different perspectives, because I was. First, I want to say a shout out to Manny for introducing us. That was kind of him, and I got really intrigued with what you're doing, and so I'm looking forward to having you share with everybody here. Place to start, obviously, is and I have to really clarify this, especially with men, is to introduce yourself. We'll get to the business in a minute. You're not defined by your title of your position. If you could share a little bit about where you're from originally, where you are now, family as much as you want to share, maybe something you've never told anybody you want to reveal to the world now. That's always kind of interesting when people think about it. Just tell us about Matt.
Sure, happy to, Mark. So, Matt Soule, I grew up very fascinated with technology and studied engineering. I have a bachelor's and master's degree, spent 20 years in aerospace. But I think at my core, what excites me the most is just creating things and doing hard things. I competed in cross country and track and field, ended up doing marathons in college, which was exciting in how it pushed me to another level, but also just like love working hard and love solving problems that likely have to do something with engineering. I spent a lot of time playing with Legos when I was a young kid, and I think that's where a lot of that passion first developed. When I was in college, I led a team that built and raced a solar car across the country from Chicago to Los Angeles, roughly along Route 66. So,
Oh,
fun fact about me that most people don't know is most people come to LA by plane or car. I came to LA for the first time in a solar powered car.
wow, that's pretty unique. I don't think many people can actually say that. Was it a
Yeah,
fun?
bringing in the future. But today, Mark, I'm the CEO of a company called Parallel, which I know we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we will. Do you want to tell us a little bit about family at all?
Sure, I am married and I have a son and a daughter, twins. They're about to turn 8 years old. And my brother and his family live in New Hampshire, and my parents are living in South Carolina. We all grew up in Connecticut, though, and it's almost as if we tried to get as far away from each other as possible. But I assure you that's not the case. We're going to be getting together this summer to celebrate my parents' 50th anniversary.
Very cool. I have a amendment since I have an aunt that's 96 right now, and she says it was so good when everybody used to live in the same town. She lives in Montreal, and she has a point. There is a point to that for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, I had that growing up, and I do miss it. I mean, it feels like it's a very hard thing to pull off these days.
Yeah.
But I grew up in Connecticut, and both sets of grandparents were within 45 minutes away, aunts and uncles. And so Thanksgiving was great, Christmas time was great, and it's a little more work. My wife grew up in Michigan, so she's very close to her sister and her brother who are still there. So we spent some time in Michigan too, but a lot more airline miles these days.
No kidding. But you're right. It's a love-hate thing type of thing. You're getting together with the family all the time, or you're not getting together with them enough time, and type of thing.
The balance.
But I think there is something to be said for, family being together and grandparents, especially with kids. It makes such a big difference. We were joking. I was joking with a cousin of mine up in Canada the other day. We had a black cocker spaniel, and my grandparents would walk to our place, and the cocker spaniel was on the balcony. Could see them. We couldn't even see them, and he can see them. And his tail started going very slowly, and as they got closer, the tail was going even faster and faster and faster. So even the cocker spaniel was excited to see to see the grandparents. I don't know if they were giving him candy too or whatever, but there's something to be said for that. So you talked about yourself a little bit as a kid and a teenager. Did you get along with your siblings?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're typical brothers. Like there were some fights over silly stuff in hindsight, but yeah.
Pretty well. Did you do the same stuff? Were you interested in the same things?
No, my brother, I got into mountain biking and running, and and doing various things around like following technology, like working from Legos. Like I started like dabbling with electronics. It was not as accessible to develop software back then. This is like the late 80s, early 90s. My brother got into music, so my brother played the guitar, and I became an engineer. He ended up becoming a physician's assistant.
Oh, wow. Does he play while he's doing it?
No, no, but he does play for his kids who love that.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, your path, was it always clear to you that you ended up, that led to your bachelor's at Northwestern and your master's at USC, both in electrical engineering? Like, what were you envisioning?
I think engineering is pretty clear. I think my family probably knew it better than I did.
Oh, really?
One of the factors for selecting Northwestern is it wasn't purely an engineering school. That was my hedge at the time. It's like, well, if it's not engineering, maybe it's something else. And so there's a diverse set of academic tracks there. I think my parents are probably like smirked when I said that, like you're an engineer, but I am. And it was good. It was good to spend time in that setting with people who weren't though.
So you said Lego. Were you ever getting into connecting wires and seeing it spark or sticking your finger in a plug or anything like that?
I have had electrical shocks, mainly just by helping my dad around the house when I was younger, but also when I was really young, I think just a little my own curiosity and like jamming my fingers in. But I was probably a toddler when I did that. So yeah, I know what electrical current feels like.
You wanted to go to the source basically
Mhm.
and see what it felt like. It's pretty interesting because I love asking people the thread of what they played with as a kid and what they got influenced as a kid and then how it went on and on. Sometimes different directions, but it always seems to come back in different ways. And we found that our firm on the premise that leaders and their businesses do even better when there's a purpose and they're doing good or something like that at the same time. Um, your career started it's pronounced Moog, right?
Moog, yes, you said it correctly.
So your career started there and then on to Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, obviously big names, aviation, defense, space. First question is why Moog first versus Lockheed Martin type of thing? How did that happen? And how did your experiences at each of them differ and stand out?
Yeah, I mean it's always a two-way street. So we were talking about Northwestern a second ago. One thing I was very sure about is that I wanted the hands-on experience when I was growing up, like taking things apart, like working on my mountain bikes, like I'd build, I wanted hands-on experience. I wanted career experience, not just like academics and studying calculus, et
Sure.
cetera. So I wanted to do co-op, and that was a cornerstone of Northwestern's engineering program. It was optional, but they had invested a lot. And we had career fairs. I remember there's all this preparation, but we had career fairs, and I was interviewing at all sorts of different tech companies that would come there. But I interviewed with Moog, felt like we really like hit it off, and they wanted me to come out, and they brought me out to Western New York, got to see their facilities, and it just started to feel right. It was consistent with the types of problems I wanted to take on. It was diverse technical problems. That's one of the things that's personally exciting about aerospace is that it's systems of systems. So it's not just electronics or mechanical stuff. It's the successful marriage of all this
Hmm.
technology to create things like aircraft and helicopters or rockets, as I would later work on. And their training was very, very hands-on, and they had a very, very uh, thoughtful structure to it that also resonated with me when I ultimately end up accepting their job offer and going there. My first summer, I spent time on the manufacturing lines working side by side with technicians because their philosophy is what before you design anything, you need to appreciate what it's like to build what's been designed. And so this is one of the most important things that they want you to have in mind when you're trying to execute on some of this problem solving. It's one thing, right, if it looks great on paper or works once in the lab, but can we build it over and over again with the right quality and the right cost and reliability, et cetera? So that was very helpful, but it really like lit that spark for me for aerospace.
One quick interjection there. It's interesting when we've done software engineers and different engineers in searching for them for our clients. One of the big things that I get all the time, especially if they're like supervisor, manager, or whatever type of thing, is they want someone that actually has built something, not just managed or thought about it or whatever. So that makes total sense. I mean, it's logical that you would want somebody that wants to do that and everything. And
Yeah, it builds it brings a huge amount of credibility to that person's experience. And today I like to call it scar tissue. Like if you've been in manufacturing, like you've got scar tissue because you've seen firsthand all the things that can go wrong and inevitably will go wrong. And that's very, very hard to train in an academic setting.
well, there's a famous line, and it was used actually with this Nigerian gal quite a while ago, not that long, but quite a while ago. She real quick, she learned how to play chess in Nigeria, and then she got better and better and better. There's some fast track in this story, and then she got better and better and went regional, went national, and then international. And they asked her, what does it feel like to not always win all the time? She said, "Oh, well, I never lose." Well, they said, well, you haven't always won. What do you do? And she said, "Well, I win and I learn. Basically, I don't win and I lose." And still, still a story, but failing is actually good for those reasons.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I think, a lot of training in general, like not just the classroom, a lot of training focuses on like, here's how to do it right. But the experiences, the failures, right, which should be interpreted as like learning opportunities. Like it also informs like, here's why you shouldn't do it this other way. And I think a lot of successful like project management execution comes down to understanding and anticipating the risks and mitigating and managing them before they actually manifest.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I probably told you this before. I compare a lot of things to sports, and teams that win championships, of which my Florida Panthers just won their second Stanley Cup. Just throw that in there, and usually lose championships first, and they both learn how to lose, and they also learn how to win at the same time. What it takes to do it. So yeah, I think you're right on the money. What was different about Lockheed and Northrop from maybe Moger? Why was that the right time to go to them?
So, so those were mixed experiences. Um, I did have a couple offers actually to stay with Moog full time after I left, but Moog was generally in the business of components and subsystems. For example, one of the things I worked on was what they call the thrust vector control assembly for a rocket engine. So this is what gimbals the rocket engine to help make the rocket fly straight. But I wanted to work on the rocket or the aircraft. And when you go to primes like Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman, like that's the type of stuff that's generally worked on. However, I took a position with Lockheed Martin with this expectation in mind, to work on the next generation aircraft, space vehicles, and the culture was very different. It's a much bigger company,
Hmm.
and at the time I started, there's already cracks in the economy from like the dot-com implosion. This is like 2001. So all these contracts that they had expected to win had not materialized, and so there was not as much work to do as they had hired for. So it was not very exciting. It was not very stimulating, and the I think the culture was not really as aspirational and visionary as I would like personally for my own drive. I built that solar car, raced it to LA, and then a couple months later, I'm at Lockheed Martin. Very, very different between those two experiences. So I only ended up a year there, Mark, before I decided maybe I should go to grad school because the economy was like on the rocks at that point. So there's just, I had lots of friends getting laid off. I was just bored because there wasn't a lot of work. Fortunately, I wasn't laid off or let go, but was pretty idle or feeling idle. So I thought about grad school and I looked up to see who was still accepting master's students, and USC was on that very short list. California seemed like the right place to go if you want to work in tech.
Hmm.
And they let me in, and I moved to LA in August of 2002. No, 2000, yeah, 2002. It's a long time ago. And I never left.
No, it's cool. And you didn't become an actor.
I
Um,
did.
well, maybe you did, but not in the film business. So you speak.
I have it. It's happened to me twice. I have been like in a restaurant and had someone come up to me and ask me, "Are you in a show?" I'm like, "No, I swear I am not.
We all
I
are.
am not in film."
Yeah, we all are in a show in one way or another, type of thing. So I guess the excitement then happened with SpaceX, right?
Yeah, so I met a couple people at USC that ended up being early employees there. And I ended up going to Northrop Grumman. I actually had a really exciting time in the beginning because I was working on a project there that was more like a startup within that larger company. It was staged as a competition with other aerospace companies that had bid to work on this solid state laser competition. But
Hmm.
then I got moved on to a more conventional program. I didn't feel adequately challenged. And meanwhile, one of my contacts there had been pestering me for a couple of years, like, hey, you should come work at this new company called SpaceX. And so I reached out in 2006 and said, are you guys still hiring? Which in hindsight is like a kind of absurd question because when I asked that question and 3 weeks later I worked there. It was probably about 100 people when I started. And last time I heard the company is 15,000.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, they had a bit of a bad thing the other day, but other than that, they've been pretty successful. Was it what do you think it would be? You know, more exciting, more vision, more everything.
I think SpaceX fully delivered on what I was expecting. Actually, I had expected worse in some ways. So it over delivered. When I went there to interview, they had just launched the first Falcon 1, which did not perform well. It failed, right? Went up, exploded, all the wreckage like rained down on Kwajalein. But what I saw was people who wanted to push the envelope and work hard and have high levels of ownership over what they're doing. And that was not what I was getting at my current role. But I also acknowledge that like this could very well not work out. But I think mainly based on the speed at which I moved through that process, I was like, you know what? Worst case, I'd be out of work for probably like 4 or 6 weeks. That's a risk worth taking, right? I got to try this.
Hmm.
And it was really hard work, and there was a lot of ownership, but I loved it. And obviously, we came very close to failure, but didn't.
Well, sometimes you just gotta. Some small companies, then Nike probably hit it right. Just do it. You know,
Yeah,
sometimes.
don't overthink it. I'm still surprised, like the risk aversion that I see in some young people who all's they're very focused on like getting the highest bidder basically for their next role and not thinking about what's my manager going to be like, what's my team and my peers going to be like, am I going to be personally satisfied with the responsibilities and the work I'm doing. I think those are huge factors. But
They are.
sometimes you're going back to like making mistakes. Like sometimes you got that's how you got to start your careers. Like figure out like, oh, it's not just purely about the money.
Yeah, and mistakes at that age aren't, I mean, within reason, aren't going to kill you. That's the time. But life's short, and if you're going to make a real impact, and I see this all the time, because we talk about people joining people, not the company, and not the brand or whatnot. That's part of it, but you're joining people, and does your manager, your boss, or whatnot, let you interact with
Yeah.
his boss, and stuff
I
like
mean,
that?
I made that own mistake. I wasn't chasing the money, but I'm like, oh, I got to work at a prime like Lockheed Martin. I was chasing the brand, but then the actual day-to-day work, um, the people I was getting to work with like weren't where I wanted to be.
Yeah, we actually have I will jump a little bit ahead on this. We actually have the candidates when they get offered a job or just before actually visualize, which I learned in sports, literally visualize getting up in the morning and going to work at the place with the people that they've met, and what are they feeling? What are they feeling about the whole thing? And because it's kind of like dating and then getting married. Once you're married, you have laundry to do and you got bills to pay and you have stuff like that. It's not the fun of just the dating part anymore. So you have to really look at that. Um, they say the fourth industrial revolution is about AI and technology and this and that, but the fifth has been touted kind of about humanity. And See, now you've gone from Lego to all the way up to space and now back to Earth and railroad tracks and things of that nature. How did you come to create parallel systems? How does it feel to be the CEO of a startup? Because it does feel, in a sector that some people could think it would be not as exciting as a SpaceX type of thing. So tell me a little bit
Yeah,
about all that.
yeah, a lot of good questions and a lot to unpack there. You and I were speaking earlier about the importance of mission, and I think that that's a natural way to start responding to that. I saw through my own career progression how important that mission was, and most of my career was spent on the mission around the technology. But when I was at SpaceX, I saw how much an important mission that people can get behind emotionally
Hmm.
can really drive people and accomplish more than you would otherwise.
Hmm.
And I loved working there. 13 years is a long time to work at SpaceX, and it did start to feel a little bit routine, but I was left with like, look at look at the impacts we made to this industry. And I've been out of there for almost 6 years now, and it's continued to make even bigger impacts. You know, just way exceeded my expectations on that front, but it's fantastic. But it got me thinking about what other industries out there that have maybe been kind of overlooked or forgotten and gotten stagnant. You know, rail is like the original tech industry. If
Yeah.
you think about it, right? It's like the born of the Industrial Revolution. It's hard to talk about U.S. history without talking about railroads.
Oh,
There's
it's
a tremendous amount,
impossible.
yeah, a tremendous amount of risk taking and capital deployed. Um, but I think a lot of people don't really think about rail or don't understand it. That was part of my own fun journey in this. Like, wait a minute, what is this industry? Like, who owns what? Like, how do you actually get on these tracks? I got onto this though because I was thinking about number one, I want to do something different, but I'm left with this impression of like mission is so important. And so a lot of my thinking was around like, look at look at all we changed by challenging assumptions, uh, challenging convention around aerospace. Aerospace had been quite stagnant at that point.
Yeah.
LA is like the cradle of aerospace, but it was massive layoffs in like the early 90s, and it was just like a fraction of what it used to be. And we obviously did it. And so I was thinking, what other industries can benefit from an infusion of new technology and thinking, but also even higher than that, my old boss wants to get people to Mars as an insurance policy for humanity. What am I doing to make sure we don't need to go use that policy, right? Because I like living here. Mars is not a hospitable place, right? It's going to make Antarctica look like a paradise.
Right.
So maybe instead of working on like cool space technology, maybe I should turn my attention down here to Earth. And so I wanted to work on like let's reinvigorate an industry with technology, but also let's score some wins for some of the environmental opportunities that are there. So I decided I want to work in the intersection of climate and transportation and technology. And I started learning about the rail industry kind of by accident. And the fascination was like it's very energy efficient, which is highly relevant to actually reducing true emissions.
Hmm.
That's why I'm personally a little bit of a skeptic that like flying cars are a true future because it's very energy intensive to fly your cars around. But rail is very energy efficient because you have low rolling resistance of steel wheels on rail. And believe it or not, it's more aerodynamic. And when you use less energy, even if you've got a battery, if you're truly tracking CO2, this is what they call scope two emissions. It's like, what's the indirect CO2 generated to recharge that battery? And one of the things we found that was very fascinating was that electric trucks, when you account for their scope two emissions based on the average CO2 content of the grid itself, like burning natural gas, for example, to create that electricity, the CO2 per mile for an electric truck was more than the CO2 per mile of a diesel freight train.
Well,
So what came to focus was that the problem here is not let's make trains cleaner. It's let's get more things, let's get more freight moving by rail and use that existing infrastructure and realize that energy benefit. And there's all these other public benefits that come with it though too. You're talking about decongesting highways. right? So making highways more productive, right? You're not sitting in traffic, but also less wear and tear on highways because you've got less trucks beating them up,
Yeah.
but also safer highways. By every measurement, it is 10 times safer to move something by rail than it is by truck, just because of the interaction between the truck and the public. So that became our mission, and we started a company around it.
I love it. And why parallel?
The name
Hmm.
started with kind of like an abstract approach to thinking about this, and so you've got parallel tracks. Yeah, we're about unlocking the infrastructure, and so we landed on the word parallel. Now, in hindsight, that was probably not the best name because when you actually go try to like register a domain in a company with a single word like that, like you've got a lot of competition. So we added systems to it.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think it makes people think, about being parallel. I mean, just a lot of things come to mind when you talk about parallel. So, I mean, you talked about the mission, talk a little bit more about the value of your technology and the impact, a little bit more about the impact on business, the impact on the country, if you will, that I
Yeah.
think could be significant.
Yeah, I'm going to start from like the 101 here because I'm going to acknowledge that everyone knows what a train is from like the age of two, but like the average person has very little understanding of like what this industry is and how this all works.
Yeah.
So because going back to the Industrial Revolution, there's been this bias towards trains have very big engines and you pull all this freight behind you that's unpowered.
Hmm.
And that's an architecture that has been reinforced and the engines have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And so what has happened is that these engines are very powerful and they're very expensive to run. And so you have to amortize that over lots of freight. That's why trains are big. And US freight railroads have gotten very, very deep understanding of all the business economics of running trains. And so they run trains extremely long, like 3 miles long, sometimes longer, sometimes up to 5 miles. But there's a problem with running something at that scale. Like, yes, you get great main line unit economics, but where do you park a big train this big, right? You park it in a massive rail terminal. Well, we're talking like 200 acres here. Well, that's a very large capital investment on part of the railroads. And by the way, this massive 200-acre facility, it's not going to be where your customers and shippers are. And so to get freight on off the network, they have to pick it up, and that's a cost. It's not prohibitive, but it's a cost. And then you put it on a trailer that a truck will drive to the shipper or customer site.
Hmm.
And they call that drayage. So it's a very unproductive form of trucking. It's not long haul trucking where you might expect to pay rates, between $2 and $2.50 a mile. You can see dray rates effectively be 6, 8, $10 a mile. They refer to those first and last mile, but really it can be up to 100 miles. Like LA to San Diego is considered drayage. So this drayage expense ends up making it cost prohibitive door to door to put something on rail less than 500 miles because you've got these two big drayage components on either end, and you've got the rail mainline component in the middle. And really above 500 miles, does it become worth it? And the drayage costs are able to compete door to door with a truck direct route. But service quality is the other challenge, Mark, of running these big trains. And especially as our transportation and logistics evolve here, more and more is driven by e-commerce, where we've all been conditioned now to expect certainty. If you order something online, it's like it's going to come next Wednesday between 2 and 4:30 p.m. If you put something on a train, you do not have that level of insight. You put it on a train and typically it disappears in our network and it may emerge Thursday, it may emerge the following Tuesday, and you don't know. And so that's what we would call low service quality. It's not purely about speed, it's about consistency.
Right.
When you're in supply chain, the opposite of that is really bad. It means that you need to have more inventory tied up in transit, more inventory tied up in warehouses. So these are some of the indirect costs that come with using a low service quality mode of transportation. So what drove our thinking was, okay, the opportunity here is drive more freight to rail, but what are the barriers for shippers? And what would attract more shippers to choose this mode? And so you got to improve service quality and you've got to reduce drayage costs. And the solution in common for both those problems is you need faster asset turn. So a rail car today might take only a few minutes to unload and load, but the problem is that you're waiting for the other 200 cars to be unloaded and loaded, and that causes you're basically held hostage for the scale of that operation. So it may take 20 hours, it may take 2 days, especially if you're like in a low density freight lane. It may take um, days and days to build a train that big. And at that point, the shipper's like, you know what, I'll just put it on a truck and pay 10% more. So by having distributed power, by having faster turn, we're able to have same day, multiple times a day departures and arrivals that provide more certainty. And what's I should back up and pause there for a second. Like our platform is not a train. We use that rail infrastructure. Our platform is a rail car that has a distributed traction system on it. We have motors and batteries. We have sensors, compute, radios, and it's an autonomous self-propelled vehicle that uses that infrastructure. And we can work alongside traditional trains on network. But the core innovation is truck competitive economics at small scale. And that's key to getting a faster asset turn and being able to realize the service quality that customers need, but also the reach further in the network so we can reduce those drayage costs. And in some use cases, we're pushing those drayage costs to zero because we're arriving directly at a customer's facility.
Well, pretty amazing, actually. Um, what stage are you in now, and when does it really hit home, if you will?
Yeah, we are active in Australia and the US right now. This is a worldwide opportunity, global impact. This is a problem that is true for all rail across the globe is the cost of getting stuff on off the network are high and a barrier. We are we're actively doing a pilot in southern Georgia right now, outside the port of Savannah,
Yes, so
and we're working with a railroad called Genesee, Wyoming on that. So very exciting. This is something we've been planning for a while. We're also working with a railroad in Western Australia called ARC Infrastructure. And we have one of our vehicles out there. We were on mainline track last year. So we are still in piloting phase, but we are developing our third generation vehicle and we'll start production of that next year. And that's when we expect initial commercial deployment in some of these geos. And we have a few other customers. We're not ready to talk about them publicly just yet, but those are the two railroads we're working with right now.
Amazon. Um,
Well,
um,
Amazon would be a shipper. So our customer and our business model, our customers are railroads. So we're the OEM, we're the tool vendor for them to augment the tools they already have, unlock the infrastructure. But here's a new tool to use to meet the needs of their customers, which could be Amazon or UPS or JB Hunt,
yeah,
Maersk. And you look at like a highway, right? We have multiple modes of transportation that are using that same infrastructure. You see a motorcycle all the way up to a Class 8 truck, like a semi truck. And rail, like only, by analogy, only has that semi truck, but we don't get parcel deliveries at our house to the semi truck. We get it with like a smaller truck. And so one way to think about what we're doing is their railroads are still running those big semi trucks connecting LA to Chicago with these big, huge trains, but we are using the delivery trucks, the smaller scale model, to bring freight from LA to San Diego or LA to Phoenix, LA to Las Vegas. Those are all examples of freight lanes where the rail infrastructure is there, but trains as a product are not able to offer a competitive service.
yeah. It's probably not a good analogy, but I have a client that doesn't have big factories or stuff like that anymore. They've got what they call micro factories of 2,500 square feet in all different places. Um, because transportation is such a big deal. And in the meantime, they can have a smaller workforce in 10 cities doing it and
Mhm.
whatnot. So weird analogy, but kind of similar in a way that because they were looking for ways to be more effective in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of businesses will, their strategy will revolve around what's the transportation cost. That's why you see a lot of like warehouses hugging port areas is
Yeah.
because the closer you get to the port, the less expensive their trucking costs will be. But with a platform like ours, but of course the real estate is more expensive though too. So it's like an interesting trade-off. It's like I'm going to reduce my transportation costs, but my real estate costs are going up. So with a platform like Parallel, we're able to offer a lower cost transportation solution. And so now we're going to be giving these shippers, this industry more optionality in terms of where they can place that. So the dream would be, we know we're not going to be as close to the port. We're going to be where the real estate costs, labor costs are lower, but we're going to have transportation costs that are very competitive that allow us to do that.
No, I love it. And, obviously we do a lot of work in talent for all types of companies, especially growing companies. And people want to go obviously where they're going to make money and in fact a lot of times where they can get equity too and have a stake in it, but they also want to go to actually to your point again about the mission, the meaning, having purpose, a little sizzle, something they could actually be proud of. I've had two conversations with Richard Branson once. We're not close, but two conversations with him, and both times the word pride came up. Does anybody say where they're proud of where they work anymore? Type of thing. And it does relate to meaning and purpose and doing something that's making a difference. And so you can combine the romanticization of the railroad with the impact you're making on transportation and costs and whatnot. You know, I could see a great commercial here somewhere with respect to that. So super exciting. And so how does it feel, really quick, to be the CEO of a startup?
I'm proud to work on this mission. I'm proud to lead this team. It is a heavy load sometimes. There's a lot of uncertainty around startups sometimes, but I think a lot of the experiences that I've developed, I tap into those pretty frequently. Like it takes speed, it takes grit to work at a startup, and
It does.
it's the type of problem I like though, because my motto is many of the things that you're proud of in life are hard work.
Well, when you win a championship, it's because you know how hard it was to get there from maybe when
Exactly.
you lost it or what it takes to get there and stuff like that. And we're looking for meaning, right? And we're not looking for just jobs type of thing. The one other thing I'd say on talent is once you develop a team that trusts each other, becomes it's huge. It's huge. Whether it's a startup or a sports team or whatever, when you trust the people around you, then you get stuff done. So obviously you're starting to do that now as the CEO. I got one more question. I got lots of more questions, but in LA we say leave them wanting more, so we can do a sequel. So we may have to play with that. But I had a client tell me in 2021 that the year 2020 and the pandemic was the year that flew by slowly. He told me, and I thought what a
Mhm.
what a great line. And even now, people feel like it was yesterday and years ago, all at the same time. With that said, and now we're at the second half of 2025 already, which is actually amazing.
Yeah.
What are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Yeah, I'm grateful for my family and their health. I'm grateful for my own personal health and being able to work on problems like this. Like it is a privilege, it's hard work, but you don't need to look far in the rest of the world to find that gratitude or like how much different things could be.
Yeah,
And it's a privilege to be able to do this in this country. Even though there's a lot of disagreement right now, this is still a great place to be,
it is.
and it is a privilege.
What are you most hopeful for?
Oh, there's so much to be hopeful for, Mark. I am hopeful for new problems next year, which have to do with keeping up with manufacturing demands.
Good stuff. Well,
I'm focused on the problems, like the problems are the way, right? You got to solve the biggest problems, and so having to build a lot of vehicles is a good problem to have.
yeah. I work with an organization as they have a program called Nonflict that teaches people how to look at that conflict is actually a good thing. It just means different ideas. Not
Yeah,
something you hate somebody over, but different ideas. And what's more fun than that, type of thing. So, well, I'm grateful that you are a leader who cares, and I have a new friend. Grateful for that too, and hopeful for the same reasons actually of what you're doing and making an impact. So, thanks for sharing all that and being on Leaders Who Care. And we're looking forward to seeing what happens in the future.
you're welcome, and thanks, Mark.